November month. Cold. My friend Katya and I were walking around the city. We turned from Frunze Street onto 1812 Goda Street, street name. There on the left side, construction site. The building has been under construction for the 4th year, and after it there is a mysterious German house, quite a large house with several entrances. There was some kind of church in the first entrance, but the doors were locked, and there is barbed wire on the territory. This surprised us. We kept wondering why there was such a fence in the church. They joked about it. Go ahead. The next entrance was some kind of office for court cases and all that. Naturally, we are not interested, and now we come to the third entrance. The door was open. I don't know. Something pulled me there. Let's go see what's here, I say. Katya also became curious. We came in. There was a pharmacy on the ground floor, but I was interested in the stairs to the top. We went up 1 floor. There was another office there, only for some social problems, blah blah blah. I say, let's go even higher. On the 3rd floor of a German house there is a plastic door covered with translucent tape. Closed. It seemed to me, or there really was someone there. When I pulled the door towards me, I heard some noise, or it was an echo from the sound of the door. In general, we go up another floor. 4th floor. I see the door is open. Kat, let's go see what's there, I said. I entered the room. For some reason, it seemed to me that someone was there. Everything there was destroyed. Everything was scattered everywhere. Papers, rags, boxes, and all household waste. It is clear that once there was some kind of office here, there were workers, some problems and issues were resolved. Now there are only ruins. Katya did not dare to come in. I was afraid of something. Still, I persuaded her to come in and take a look. I was interested in examining the premises of a house that I had never been to, but had passed by many times. The room is large. As you enter, there are 3 offices connected by doors. There is another room on the right, a toilet on the left, another room and a corridor leading to another part of the house. It was this corridor that interested me. We followed it. At the end of it, there was a room. From the window, there was a view of the courtyard, which had apparently been empty for several years. We entered the last room. There was a large closet. There were some papers scattered everywhere in the room. Some kind of black hat. Katya and I laughed when I tried it on. She took a photo of me. Then I went to the closet, opened it, and saw a hole at the bottom. She walked through the wall to another part of the building. I told Katya to wait for me in this room. She told me not to go there. I'm a stubborn person, and I just want thrills. I made my way into some dark room. The windows were covered or blocked with something. From this room there was a similar corridor, only in the opposite direction. Candles were burning in the corridor. There was silence. Underfoot there is a long carpet that covers the entire corridor. There is an alley of candles along the corridor. I reach the end of the corridor and peek around the corner. There were candles burning everywhere. The windows were boarded up. People were walking around in some kind of robes with hoods. I was overcome with horror. A lot of questions arose. What kind of place is it? What is this all for? People were going to one place. I sat there for about 10 minutes around the corner, making sure that everyone had left, so that no one will burn me. I saw where they were going and slowly went after them. I ended up going through another corridor. There was darkness everywhere. The candles barely illuminated the space. Suddenly, I heard some prayers, but I still didn't understand in what language they were read. Maybe Latin. I came to a large, gloomy room where the ministers of this church were gathered. They brought some guy. He screamed and struggled. They forced him onto the table and tied his hands and feet. And then I thought, maybe this is some kind of prank or something. A certain church leader, read some kind of incomprehensible prayer, and the rest repeated after him. Then the torches were lit, and I saw a satanic star behind the one who was speaking. I realized that most likely everything was for real. This continued for about another 10 minutes. He took a huge knife, dagger, and pierced the chest of the poor fellow who was lying on the table. An invincible horror seized me. My heart beat so fast that I could no longer stand still. And at that very moment, they all seemed to sense my fear. They all turned in my direction. I remember that eyes were shining from the dark hood. Headlong, I rushed through the corridor, then ran into the hall and rushed to the finish line back to that hole in the wall. She was not visible in the darkness. He quickly found a hole in the wall and went out to Katya. She says she was tired of waiting and called several times. I grabbed her and said, "Let's run from here. Let's run." "What's happened?" Katya asked. I was silent. I was scared to death. I tried not to make any noise so that they wouldn't hear the noise behind the wall. We ran out onto the staircase. Someone was breaking in from above, but we could hear that there was a good lock on the door. We ran down. They ran out into the street and ran in the other direction so as never to pass by this building again. I told Katya what happened. She doesn't believe it. He thinks I was joking. I'm not sure why I'm writing this down on paper and not on my computer. I guess I've just noticed some odd things. It's not that I don't trust the computer. I just need to organize my thoughts. I need to get down all the details somewhere objective, somewhere I know that what I write can't be deleted or changed. Not that that's happened. It's just everything blurs together here, and the fog of memory lends a strange cast to things. I'm starting to feel cramped in this small apartment. Maybe that's the problem. I just had to go and choose the cheapest apartment, the only one in the basement. The lack of windows down here makes day and night seem to slip by seamlessly. I haven't been out in a few days because I've been working on this programming project so intensively. I suppose I just wanted to get it done. Hours of sitting and staring at a monitor can make anyone feel strange, I know, but I don't think that's it. I'm not sure when I first started to feel like something was odd. I can't even define what it is. Maybe I just haven't talked to anyone in a while. That's the first thing that crept up on me. Everyone I normally talk to online while I program has been idle, or they've simply not logged on at all. My instant messages go unanswered. The last email I got from anybody was a friend saying he'd talk to me when he got back from the store, and that was yesterday. I'd call with my cell phone, but reception's terrible down here. Yeah, that's it. I just need to call someone. I'm going to go outside. Well, that didn't work so well. As the tingle of fear fades, I'm feeling a little ridiculous for being scared at all. I looked in the mirror before I went out, but I didn't shave the 2-day stubble I've grown. I figured I was just going out for a quick cell phone call. I did change my shirt, though, because it was lunchtime and I guessed that I'd run into at least one person I knew. That didn't end up happening. I wish it did. When I went out, I opened the door to my small apartment slowly. A small feeling of apprehension had somehow already lodged itself in me, for some indefinable reason. I chalked it up to having not spoken to anyone but myself for a day or two. I peered down the dingy gray hallway, made dingier by the fact that it was a basement hallway. On one end, a large metal door led to the building's furnace room. It was locked, of course. 2 dreary soda machines stood by it. I bought a soda from one the first day I moved in, but it had a 2-year-old expiration date. I'm fairly sure nobody knows those machines are even down here, or my cheap landlady just doesn't care to get them restocked. I closed my door softly and walked the other direction, taking care not to make a sound. I have no idea why I chose to do that, but it was fun giving in to the strange impulse not to break the droning hum of the soda machines, at least for the moment. I got to the stairwell and took the stairs up to the building's front door. I looked through the heavy door's small square window and received quite the shock. It was definitely not lunchtime. City gloom hung over the dark street outside, and the traffic lights at the intersection in the distance blinked yellow. Dim clouds, purple and black from the glow of the city, hung overhead. Nothing moved, save the few sidewalk trees that shifted in the wind. I remember shivering, though I wasn't cold. Maybe it was the wind outside. I could vaguely hear it through the heavy metal door, and I knew it was that unique kind of late-night wind, the kind that was constant, cold and quiet, save for the rhythmic music it made as it passed through countless unseen tree leaves. I decided not to go outside. Now remember, I don't want you talking to him unless I'm around, you hear? Yes, Dad. I'm serious. Now tuck in your shirt. He's here. The front door swung open, and there stood Uncle Tommy, drenched in sweat from a day's work in the summer heat. "It's a scorcher out there, ain't it?" he said, putting his bag on the floor and untying his boots. "I appreciate you letting me crash for the night." "Just so long as you're gone in the morning," my dad replied coldly. "Of course." "Now," Uncle Tommy said, turning to me and lowering himself to a knee. "Where's my hug at? Been a while since I seen you last." I took a couple steps toward him and leaned in for a hug. His tight embrace made me uncomfortable, and I let out a light whimper. "Don't you know it's 100 degrees out there?" he asked, tugging at my long sleeves. "I haven't been outside today," I recited to him. "Don't you have some chores to finish up?" Dad interjected. I knew that was my cue to leave, so I shuffled off to my room. Later that night, I lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to be comfortable, when I heard the thud of footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom. After several long seconds of silence, the door opened quietly. The dark silhouette of a man entered the room, and the door closed again. For several more seconds, there was nothing but unrelenting silence. I might have thought I had dreamt it all if it weren't for the sound of a hushed breath being carefully released. I could feel him getting nearer. The warmth of another person in the room was unfamiliar at this hour. I was not prepared for this. I prayed he would go away, to even come back in the morning if he must. He reached down and touched me. He rolled me onto my stomach and lifted up my shirt. From the corner of my eye, I could see two things: the faint beam of a pocket flashlight and Uncle Tommy's eyes studying my bare skin. His rough fingers ran up and down my back. Suddenly, he got up and walked to the bedroom door and left. I tried again to fall asleep, eventually succeeding. He was gone by the time I awoke. Around noon, the phone rang while my father was out. "Hello?" I answered. "Hey, buddy." "Uncle Tommy?" "Yeah. Your dad around?" "No, sir. Went to the store." "Good," he said, sounding a bit nervous. He paused for a moment. "I'm calling about last night. I don't know if you were awake or not." "I was." The rain was falling heavily. It was like driving through a thick curtain of water. He eased off the accelerator a little. Had to be careful driving on wild nights like these. The last thing you'd want is to have an accident or breakdown. You just want to be at home on these stormy nights. The thwack-thwack of the windscreen wipers was hypnotic. He stared out into the glow of the headlights. The rain sounded like white noise interference as it battered the car. He was reminded of the opening scenes of a Hitchcock film. Through the wash of the rain, he spotted a figure at the side of the road. The person wore a green parka and had their thumb jerked out. Why on earth would anyone be hitchhiking tonight? Surely you would just stay put until the morning. They must have been in a rush to get where they were going. He signaled down and pulled over. The hitchhiker climbed in. He shut the door quickly, glad to be out of the rain. He pulled his hood back and sighed. He was somewhere in his mid-20s and had wild red hair and a thick beard. "Awful night, eh?" said the driver. The hitchhiker held his gaze for a long moment. Drops of rainwater trickled down his face. "Yes, yes, it is." The driver pulled out and continued through the storm. The hitcher glanced over his shoulder into the blackness behind them. "You okay?" The hitcher simply nodded. They drove on in silence for a short while. The BBC radio phone and blaring out from the car's speakers filled in for conversation. They listened to the radio and their own thoughts as they moved on. "Where are you headed?" asked the driver. "North." The hitcher pointed. "Are you traveling to visit friends?" The driver couldn't tell if that was a yes or a no. He adjusted his tie nervously. The hitcher stared at him in his suit and tie. The hitcher seemed scruffy in comparison in his parka and Pink Floyd t-shirt. "Do you work around here?" asked the hitcher. "Yes," said the driver. "I was stuck late at the office. You know how it is." "No, not really." Again they drifted into silence. The talk radio show carried on as they drove through the wind and rain. The hitcher shifted in his seat and stared out the windscreen. "No music?" the hitcher asked. "What? Is there no music we could listen to?" "I like the talk radio shows. I'm not really a music fan." The hitcher's eyes glazed over for a moment. Then he spoke. "I like listening to music. It calms me down." The driver said nothing. Several miles later, there was a news bulletin on the radio. The reporter tried to remain professional as she read the announcement. "We are getting reports that a patient has escaped from a Manchester psychiatric institution. The man is said to be psychopathic and is said to have a history of murder." The hitcher jabbed a finger on the button on the radio panel. Tinny pop music blurted out from the speakers. The driver stared at his passenger, his question unasked. "I hate the news," answered the hitcher. "It's so depressing. It brings me down. There is never any good news, is there?" The driver did not reply. "Don't worry, I'm not the killer," said the hitcher, fidgeting with his coat. "No?" said the driver. "I mean, no, of course you aren't." One day, late at night, I had to go home alone. It was winter. The snow crunched under my feet, and because of this I could hear any steps. The road went past the cemetery. I was never afraid of it because I didn't believe before about everything that they say about it, because I had never encountered it, unlike my friends and acquaintances. I'm not generally a timid person, but that day as I was walking I heard first distant steps behind me, then a little closer. But I didn't turn around, but quickened my pace because I was scared. After all, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. There was not much left to my house when they called me. I turned and saw a man, a guy about 25 years old. At first I thought I was an acquaintance, but I didn't approach. Then he himself came up and asked me if I knew where this road leads. I answered him that to the center. He said thank you and left. Well, I thought even then that it was somehow strange that I had been lost for so long, but the guy couldn't help but be very handsome. The next day, when they arrived at the institute, the girls were eagerly discussing something. When I asked what was the matter, they told me that yesterday a guy hanged himself, as they say because of a girl, exactly in the place where I passed yesterday. They described him to me, what he looked like and what he was wearing. There was no doubt it was that guy. After that, I didn't walk that road anymore. But exactly a year later, I dreamed about that guy and told me thank you for pointing me out. He has the right path and he has found peace. After that dream, for the first time, I felt so at ease. But I don't understand how this can even be. In high school, my friends and I were messing around with a Ouija board one night. We had done it before and nothing remarkable had ever happened. We usually did it to try and scare each other or our girlfriends. We all thought it was a joke. That night there was no one else home except the 7 of us, and we were all together around the board. One of the girls there wanted to try it. She had never done it before. This time was different. The board misspelled some of the words the same way every time. It gave answers that seemed really historically accurate for our town, things we neither knew or cared about. Long story short, the spirit claimed it was a 10-year-old boy who had died on the property in the 1800s and was buried there too in an unmarked grave. My friend's house was on a farm in the edge of town. We were all a little freaked out because the board had never been so detailed and consistent. However, we were still skeptical, and we were all assuming one of us was trying to scare the rest. Finally, my friend asked if the spirit could do something to prove he was there with us. It went to yes, and then spelled out KNOCK. Then the planchette stopped moving. We just all stared at it silently, and then there was a rap, rap, rap on the window right next to us. The lights were on outside, and there was absolutely no one out there. We never touched that effing board again. Growing up, my bedroom was the only one that faced the front of the house street. When I was about 8 or 9, I woke up to my dad calmly but firmly telling me to get up, go in the bathroom, and shut the door. I was annoyed because I was half asleep, but I listened. Apparently, I was more tired than I realized, because I fell asleep on the bathroom floor. The next morning, I asked my mom what happened. She seemed oblivious and confused. I looked at my dad like she was crazy, and I asked him why he had woken me up. He denied doing it. I was becoming frustrated to the point of tears, but I ultimately let it go. Fast forward to college. I was home one break, and I decided to ask again. I had thought of that night off and on for years, and it still bothered me. This time, my dad goes, "Ha! I was wondering if you even remembered that." Turns out that a lot of houses on our block were being vandalized and robbed all those years ago. Someone had broken into the garage and was inside the house. My room was partially over the garage. My dad heard it happen and quietly got me to safety. Police were called. The guy ran. He was never caught, however, and my parents didn't want a terrified kid on their hands. So for years they pretended like nothing had ever happened. It wasn't supernatural, but it was unsettling for sure. My uncle was walking down a lonely dirt road one day. He came upon a man who also was walking down that road. The man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was scared of my uncle, and my uncle was scared of that man. But they kept on walking, and it began to get dark. The man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was very scared of my uncle, and my uncle was very scared of that man. But they kept on walking, and they came to a big woods. It was getting darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was really scared of my uncle, and my uncle was really scared of that man. But they kept on walking, and deep down into the woods they went. It was getting darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was terrible scared of my uncle, and the narrator's uncle eventually screamed. When Ivan Mila died in 2019, it wasn't his loss that was mourned, but the fact that it was now likely that he would never concretely be tied to the victims he was only suspected of murdering. According to The Guardian, in 1996, Mila was convicted of murdering 7 hikers in Australia, all aged between 19 and 22 years old, but it's suspected that his true victim count was closer to 20. The killings that he was convicted of started in 1989, with the disappearance of Deborah Everest and James Gibson. Other victims disappeared while backpacking across Australia, and the killings went on for 4 years before a connection was made. When Everest and Gibson's bodies were finally found in the Belanglo State Forest in 1993, the handful of suspects got smaller, partially with the help of Paul Onions, a backpacker who had hitched a ride with Mila and escaped an attack. Mila's trial took 18 weeks, and he was given 7 consecutive life sentences. Up until his death, possible victims' families still continued to hold out hope that he would confess to more murders. He didn't. There's a terrifying footnote to the story, too. In 2010, his great-nephew, Matthew Mila, headed into the Belanglo State Forest with a friend, then murdered him. He is reported as saying, "You know me, you know my family, you know the last name Mila. I did what they do." A ton of stories have taken shape along the shores and in the depths of Washington's Lake Crescent over the centuries, and Backpacker says the trails along the lake are among the most haunted in the country. There have been numerous sightings of the ghostly form of a woman drifting across the surface of the lake. She might not be just a tall tale, though. The lake was the site of a gruesome murder, and the ghostly lady is thought to be the victim's restless spirit. According to Olympic National Park trips, it started in 1936. That's when a barmaid named Hallie gave Love another go and married Monty Illingworth. The relationship was an abusive one from the start, and in less than a year, Hallie disappeared amid rumors that she'd run off with a sailor. No one really believed it, but Illingworth moved away. And Hallie? Her body didn't surface until 1940, when her perfectly preserved remains floated to the surface of the lake. Hallie's body had undergone a process called saponification, which turned her flesh into something like soap and earned her the name the Ivory Soap Corpse. But fortunately for our understanding of what happened, the process also preserved signs that Hallie had been strangled before being dumped into the lake. It also preserved the rope that she'd been weighed down with, leading to an investigation that pointed right to Illingworth, who headed straight to jail. He was paroled after a few years, and some hikers who visit the lake say Hallie is still there. Aokigahara is a forest about 100 miles from Tokyo, and while it's a beautiful place that attracts hikers from all over the country and beyond, those who venture into the woods are likely to find something that speaks to the area's dark nickname, the Suicide Forest. According to the Washington Post, the forest is filled with memorials in the form of personal effects and photographs. It's also not uncommon for hikers to stumble across a body. Hikers looking to explore Aokigahara can hire guides, a job that appears less peaceful than being a ranger or forest guide elsewhere. National Geographic reports that one guide, Toru Kurihara, found 36 bodies in a span of just 37 days. It's such a popular destination for those looking to take their own life that the trails are filled with signs reminding people that the life you were given from your parents is precious, and pleading with people to meditate on what they're planning on doing and encouraging them to talk to someone instead. The last time authorities released statistics was in 2010, when 247 people attempted to take their own life in the forest, and there were 54 confirmed deaths. According to National Geographic, the forest's connection to suicide goes back to ancient folklore. It is said that families would leave elderly relatives there to die in a practice called ubasut. Add in a few pop culture references of suicide, and the forest became infamous for it. The Appalachian Trail goes through 14 states, from Maine to Georgia, and covers nearly 2,200 miles. Those who visit Bluff Mountain while hiking the trail are reportedly kept awake at night by the spirit of a little boy who died there in 1891. Through hikers report a number of odd occurrences happening around the Punchbowl Mountain Shelter, including one who swore, via Podium Runner, that he woke in the middle of the night to see the little boy standing in the corner. In the morning, all of the hikers' clothes had been neatly folded, and a pile of dried chestnuts had been set out for him. Others report being awakened by someone poking them and seeing a little boy running ahead just out of sight. They know exactly who it is, too. Little Oddie Klein Powell. According to Blue Ridge Country, Powell was just about to turn 5 years old when his teacher sent him and a few other students out to gather firewood on a cold November day. This was, after all, 1891. He never returned. Search parties scoured the mountain, but it wasn't until the following April that a group of hunters found his remains. He was buried on his parents' property, and even though the family moved away, those who stayed remembered him with a memorial built where he died, 7 miles from his schoolhouse. There's a bronze plaque there today, and according to many hikers, his spirit remains there too. In the early days of 1959, the remains of 9 hikers were discovered on the Soviet Union's ominously named Dead Mountain. They had cut their way out of their tent from the inside, leaving behind neatly folded clothes and provisions. When they were found, the bodies were in different yet terrifying conditions. Most were half-dressed and had broken bones. Some were missing eyes, and one woman was missing her tongue. The official cause of death was hypothermia, and the so-called Dyatlov Pass incident became the stuff of conspiracy theories and tall tales. In 2019, the BBC reported that Russian authorities were reopening the case, and investigators looked at 75 theories that had sprung up around the incident. In 2021, researchers from the Snow and Avalanche Simulation Laboratory in Switzerland published results of a study outlining what they determined to be the most plausible explanation via live science. They explained that the tent was pitched in a hollow that the hikers had carved into the mountain, and it's posited that fresh snowfall and winds triggered a slab avalanche that sent the 9 scrambling from their shelter and into the freezing cold. Is this what really happened? It's unlikely that anyone will ever get confirmation for sure, but lead researcher Johann Gaum took something else away from the incident. They took care of their injured friends. No one was left behind. I think this is a great story of courage and friendship in the face of a brutal force of nature.